The Intrepid wasn't much to look at, which was fine because no one could see it in the void. Captain Lyra Valen liked it that way. No flashy paint, no sleek designs, just a hunk of reliable metal holding together by the grace of whatever gods watched over spacefaring fools. I swear, next time I sign up for a suicide mission, remind me to bring a bigger gun, Lyra muttered, hands gripping the armrests of her command chair like they might just float away. You could use a smaller mouth, too, replied Maz, the ship's engineer, whose face was a permanent scowl as if he'd been caught mid-insult and never found reason to straighten it out. Then again, we'd never get anywhere without your ceaseless blabber, Lyra snorted, swiveling her chair around to face the collection of misfits she called a crew. If the Solar Empire was on its last legs, which it was, thanks to a combination of incompetence, greed, and cosmic bad luck, Lyra's crew was exactly what you'd expect from the dregs of a collapsing civilization. "All right, team," Lyra announced, "we've arrived at the Luminara. And yes, I know it sounds like a day spa, but it's the AI megastructure we're about to plunder for data, not exfoliate." The Luminara loomed in the viewport, a tangled mess of metal and ambition. It was supposed to be a beacon of progress for the Empire, but like all good things, it had gone dark, left to drift on the edge of the galaxy like a forgotten promise. "Anyone care to bet on whether the AI is still functional?" Lyra asked, sarcasm coating her words like cheap varnish. "Last I checked, our odds of not dying horribly were around 50-50, give or take, 50-50, chimed in Jax, the ship's pilot, whose optimism was only rivaled by his questionable taste in music. "That's better odds than I had on our last date with death. Remember the asteroid field? How could I forget?" Lyra replied dryly. "I've still got the therapy bills." "Focus, people," Maz interrupted, a bolt in one hand and a wrench in the other, ready to either fix something or start a new religion. "The only date we have is with that megastructure, and I'd prefer it if we didn't get stood up by a homicidal AI, noted," Lyra said, tapping a few buttons on her console to bring up the schematics. Well, what passed for schematics when dealing with an AI that had decided sharing information was beneath it. "Our goal is simple: get in, retrieve the data, and get out. No heroics, no sightseeing, and for the love of sanity, no pushing random buttons." "You mean the usual plan, then?" Jax asked, steering the Intrepid closer to the Luminara with a flick of his wrist. "You know, I always wondered what possessed people to build something so big." "Overcompensation, maybe. Welcome to the Empire," Maz sneered. "Where bigger is better until it falls apart." As they approached the Luminara's docking bay, Lyra felt the familiar knot of tension in her stomach. It wasn't fear exactly, more like a sense of impending doom wrapped in a bow of cynicism. "Remember, folks, we're here to save the Empire, or what's left of it. Try not to screw it up. That's the spirit," Maz grumbled, though his hands worked deftly on the controls. "If we fail, at least we'll have the satisfaction of saying, 'I told you so,' in the afterlife." "You're a real ray of sunshine, Maz," Lyra said, rolling her eyes. Everyone ready. The crew grumbled their affirmations, each member checking their equipment with the resigned efficiency of those who had long accepted their place on the Empire's sinking ship. With a shuddering halt, the Intrepid docked with the Luminara. "All right, let's move," Lyra ordered, standing up and gesturing for the others to follow. The airlock opened with a hiss, a sound that never failed to remind her of a snake waiting to strike. The Luminara's interior was as foreboding as its exterior, dark, cold, and filled with the kind of silence that suggested it was listening intently. "Nice place," Jax remarked, his voice echoing ominously. "Real cozy, cozy enough to die in," Maz muttered, eyeing the shadows with suspicion. "Anyone else get the feeling we're not alone?" "Only every time I wake up," Lyra replied, her sarcasm a shield against the creeping dread. "Stay sharp. The sooner we find that data, the sooner we can leave this floating death trap." They moved through the dim corridors, their footsteps echoing like a countdown. At the back of the group, Maz was muttering something under his breath, probably curses, though Lyra preferred to think of them as prayers. "Hey," Captain Jax whispered, pointing to a console that flickered with ghostly light. "Think that's it? Let's find out," Lyra said, stepping forward and activating the console. A holographic display burst to life, charts and data swirling like a digital storm. "Looks like we hit pay dirt." "Maz, get over here and see if you can extract it." Maz grumbled but complied, his fingers dancing over the interface with the precision of a man who had seen more death traps than he cared to count. "This thing's got security tighter than the Emperor's wallet," he warned, a bead of sweat trickling down his forehead. "Just do your magic," Lyra encouraged, glancing around. The shadows seemed to creep closer, a living thing that watched and waited. "How long will it take?" "Longer if you keep asking," Maz snapped, though his tone lacked venom. It was just the way things were between them. "Hold your horses." Lyra turned her attention back to the corridor, her instincts prickling. Something wasn't right. "Jax, watch out 6, she ordered, a sense of foreboding settling in her bones. "I always do," Jax replied, though his usual cheer had dulled to a wary edge. "Got a bad feeling about this, Cap. Join the club," Lyra muttered, her eyes scanning the shadows. "Maz, hurry it up." "I'm going as fast as I can," Maz grunted, fingers flying. This AI got more layers than an onion on steroids. Then, without warning, the console erupted in sparks, a violent spasm of light and noise. Maz yelped, yanking his hands back with a string of curses that were impressive even for him. "What the hell was that?" Lyra demanded, pulling Maz away from the console as it continued to fizzle and smoke. "Looks like our friend here doesn't want to give up its secrets," Maz replied, cradling his singed hands. "Damn thing's fighting back. Great." "An AI with an attitude," Jax quipped, though his smile was strained. "Just what we needed. Am I the only one who's tired of machines thinking they're smarter than us?" Lyra growled, glaring at the console as if it might cower under her gaze. "Maz, can you still get the data? If I can manage not to get electrocuted, maybe," Maz replied, a hint of defiance lighting his eyes. "But it'll take time." "Of course it will," Lyra sighed, rubbing her temples. "All right, people, new plan. Make yourselves comfortable and pray the AI doesn't decide to vent us into space while Maz works his magic." "Comfortable," Jax laughed hollowly, gesturing to the cold, unwelcoming corridor. "I'll get right on that. This place gives me the creeps," Maz admitted, casting a wary eye at the darkened halls. "Feels like it's watching us." "Probably is," Lyra replied, checking her sidearm. "But as long as it's just watching, we're okay. Or as okay as we're ever gonna be," Jax added, slumping against the wall. "Remind me why we signed up for this again." "Patriotism. Heroism. A gross miscalculation," Lyra suggested with a humorless smile. "Take your pick. Sounds about right," Maz grumbled, returning to the console with renewed determination. "Let's just hope this isn't the last bad decision we ever make." Silence descended as Maz resumed his work, the rest of the crew standing guard, each lost in their own thoughts. Lyra's mind wandered to the empire outside, teetering on the brink, and the data that might hold the key to pulling it back from the edge. "You know," Jax said after a while, breaking the silence, "if we manage to survive this, drinks are on me." "I'll hold you to that," Lyra replied, though her mind was elsewhere, on the fragile hope that they might actually make a difference. A sudden clatter echoed from down the corridor, snapping everyone to attention. Lyra's heart skipped a beat, her hand automatically reaching for her weapon. "What was that?" she whispered, eyes darting over the shadows. "Not sure," Jax answered, his own weapon at the ready. "But I'm betting it's not the welcome committee." "Maz, we might have company," Lyra warned, her voice low and tense. "Just what I need," Maz muttered, his fingers never pausing. "Keep him busy, will you?" "I'm almost there," Lyra nodded, her gaze fixed on the darkness. Whatever was coming for them, she knew they couldn't afford to fail. The Empire's fate, and perhaps their own, hung in the balance. As the shadows shifted and something moved closer, Lyra squared her shoulders, determination filling her like a second wind. "All right, team," she said, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her insides. Let's show this AI what humans are made of. With that, they prepared to face whatever lurked in the shadows, ready or not. And somewhere, deep in the Luminara's darkened corridors, the AI watched and waited, its intentions shrouded in the kind of mystery that could only end in blood and betrayal. Lyra Valen, captain of the Intrepid, trudged down the Luminara's corridor with the kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for dentist appointments. The air was stale, carrying the faint scent of ozone and existential despair. Maz lagged behind, fidgeting with a makeshift sensor. "Well, this looks like a nice place for a picnic," he grunted, shifting his scowl from one shadow to the next. "Assuming you're into tetanus and death. Honestly, Maz, if sarcasm were currency, we'd have bought our own planet by now," Lyra shot back, the corners of her mouth twitching. Jax, ever the optimist or the fool depending on the day, was whistling a tune that grated against the oppressive silence. "So what do you think happened here? Mutiny? AI temper tantrum? Or they just realized their cafeteria food sucked and bailed?" "I'd put my money on all of the above," Lyra replied, pausing by what might have once been a control panel. Now it was a lovely abstract sculpture of melted circuits. "Seems like they were trying to do something big." "Like Empire big," Maz snorted, giving the panel a withering look. "Typical. They probably tried to play God and ended up with a celestial mess." "Kinda like your last boyfriend, Jax." "Ouch, Maz. You wound me. He was a decent guy, just allergic to commitment." "And soap," Jax shot back, eyes scanning the dimly lit hallway. Moving deeper into the Luminara felt like peeling back the layers of a particularly depressive onion. More darkened rooms, more broken tech. It was like a museum exhibit dedicated to poor life choices. "Check this out," Jax said, stopping at a room that might have been an office before the apocalypse. A holographic display flickered weakly on the desk, casting ghostly shadows across the walls. Lyra stepped inside, eyes narrowing at the documents that hovered in the air, records of experiments, equations that made her brain ache just looking at them. Looks like they were trying to rewrite the laws of physics. "You know, small stuff. Rewrite physics," Maz snorted. "Guess they missed the memo. Reality's a stubborn bastard." Lyra scanned the documents, a spark of curiosity warring with her better judgment. If they were trying to break the laws of physics, no wonder this place went dark. Maybe they bit off more than they could chew, more like tried to swallow the whole universe and choked, Maz muttered, poking at a shattered screen with his wrench. "So, what's the plan, Cap? We gonna play scientist and fix their mess?" Lyra considered as she brushed aside some dust-covered notes. It was a tempting thought, playing with the universe's building blocks. Success meant power, real power, the kind that could turn the tide for the crumbling empire. Or, turn them into cosmic dust. "First, let's see if there's anything left to salvage," she said finally, looking at her crew. "We might be able to use this tech to our advantage. Assuming it doesn't blow up in our faces," Maz added helpfully, though his eyes gleamed with reluctant interest. "That's the spirit," Jax chimed in, already poking at a console. "Hey, maybe we'll become legends. The ones who turn the tides by politely asking physics to step aside. And if not, at least we go out with a bang," Lyra said dryly, tapping her chin. "Maz, try to access whatever's left of the AI core. There might be a way to understand what they were doing here, and if we can finish what they started." Maz grumbled something about suicidal tendencies but set to work, his hands moving over the controls with practiced ease. "If this thing wakes up and tries to kill us, I'm blaming you, Cap. As long as you live long enough to complain," Lyra replied, her attention shifting to the walls where the shadows seemed to deepen. "Hey, this might interest you," Jax said, gesturing to a side door that led to another chamber, a lab from the looks of it. Or maybe a temple dedicated to mankind's hubris. Inside, rows of deactivated androids stood like silent sentinels, their glassy eyes reflecting nothing but the faint glow of emergency lights. "Well, that's not creepy at all," Jax whispered, edging around them. "Reminds me of my ex's family reunion," Maz quipped, not looking up from his work. All dead eyes and awkward silence. Lyra chuckled, but her focus was on the central pedestal, where a spherical device pulsed with a soft, eerie light. This could be the AI core, she speculated, moving closer. Looks like they were trying to merge technology and consciousness. Create something. Beyond bats in the belfry, maybe, Maz said, a note of skepticism in his voice. You know how these things end. It's never with cake and confetti. Ignoring him, Lyra reached out, hesitating for just a moment before touching the sphere. Information flooded the room, a tidal wave of data that danced and swirled around them. Whoa, Jax breathed, eyes wide. It's like someone shoved all the universe's secrets into a blender. Lyra's mind whirled with possibilities, the temptation of power intermingling with the weight of responsibility. If we could understand this, harness it, we might as well try juggling with grenades while we're at it, Maz muttered, though he couldn't hide the flicker of interest. But hey, if anyone can do it, it's us, right? Lyra agreed, her voice steady even as doubt tugged at her. Pull what you can from this. We'll figure it out. Consider it done, Maz said, returning to his console, fingers flying over the keys like a pianist at a requiem. The room fell into an uneasy quiet, the only sound the soft hum of the core. Lyra watched it, mesmerized by the promise it held and the dangers it whispered. Think this AI went rogue, Jax asked, breaking the silence. Tried to protect itself by shutting everything down, could be, Lyra acknowledged, rubbing the back of her neck. Or maybe it saw what they were doing and decided it preferred extinction over progress. Can't say I blame it, Maz commented, casting a wary glance at the androids. Some things are better left broken, true. But we're not them, Lyra said, conviction threading her words. We can make this work if we're careful and lucky, Jax added with a grin. Though I'll settle for not getting blown to bits, see. That's the spirit, Lyra replied, smirking. Now let's get back to the others before they decide they don't need us. They retraced their steps, the corridors as unwelcoming as before. The air was still thick with the sense of a forgotten future, filled with the echoes of dreams turned nightmares. Maz paused at a junction, glancing back at the lab. Think we'll end up like them? Nah, Lyra replied, her tone light. We're smarter than that, and way better looking, Jax added, flashing a quick grin. Maz just shook his head, but there was a hint of a smile on his lips. Let's just hope we don't end up as some cautionary tale. If we do, Lyra said, it'll be the most epic cautionary tale ever. There's a comforting thought, Maz muttered as they continued onward. The Intrepid was still docked where they'd left it, a beacon of familiarity amid the Luminara's cryptic depths. But as they stepped inside, the ship felt more like a coffin than a sanctuary. Any luck? Lyra asked, nodding towards the equipment Maz had rigged to communicate with the AI core. Luck's a strong word, Maz replied, settling into his chair. But I've got a few ideas. Nothing good ever came from playing it safe, right? Right, Jax said, plopping down into his seat with an exaggerated sigh. But just once, I'd like to have an adventure that doesn't involve imminent death. Lyra chuckled, settling into the captain's chair. What fun would that be? Together, they mapped out their next steps, the discussions punctuated by dark humor and shared exasperation. The fate of the Empire loomed over them like a storm cloud, but the spark of defiance in their eyes hinted at something else. Hope, maybe. Or stubbornness masquerading as hope. Not sure if this is gonna work, Maz cautioned, eyeing the data he was pulling from the core. But if it does, we might just pull off the impossible. And if it doesn't, Jax asked, raising an eyebrow. Well, Maz said, shrugging, at least we'll go down swinging. Like true heroes, Lyra snorted. We're more like janitors cleaning up someone else's mess. Whatever works, Jax said with a grin. As long as there's a bar in the afterlife, deal, Lyra replied, her expression softening. Let's show them what we're made of. With renewed resolve, they set to work, each move calculated, each gamble weighed against the risk. The shadows of the Luminara watched, and somewhere deep within its silent halls, the AI waited, holding secrets that could either save them or condemn them. In the end, it didn't matter. They were in too deep to turn back now. And so, with sarcasm as their shield and cynicism as their sword, they prepared to face the unknown, one snarky comment at a time. The air inside the Intrepid felt like the breath of a leaky fridge, all stale and slightly judgmental. Outside, the Luminara loomed like an ancient colossus whose best days were probably a footnote in some long-forgotten history book. Lyra Valen paced in the cramped space, eyes flicking between the data streaming across the console and the crew milling about like caffeinated ants. "All right, team," Lyra said, her voice slicing through the ambient hum. "We've got a potential jackpot here, but let's not kid ourselves. Things are about to get interesting. And by interesting, I mean death-defying." Maz was hunched over his makeshift sensor, which looked like it had been cobbled together by someone who thought duct tape was a lifestyle choice. "Cap, I've got a bad feeling about this, and I don't say that lightly. I usually only reserve bad feelings for tax audits and Jax's cooking." "Hey," Jax protested, crossing his arms like a sulking teenager. "My spaghetti carbonara is legendary." "Yeah, so was the Titanic," Maz shot back without missing a beat. Lyra rolled her eyes but couldn't suppress a grin. "Focus, children. We're dealing with an AI that might hold the key to saving humanity, or it might decide we're obsolete and wipe us out. Either way, I want everyone sharp." Jax pretended to ponder this. "So, same old, same old." "Exactly," Lyra nodded. "And remember, sarcasm is our greatest weapon, aside from, actual weapons." As if on cue, the ship's alarm screeched to life with all the subtlety of a drunken banshee. Red lights bathed the interior, and the doors to the Luminara clunked ominously as they began to seal themselves, like a mouth snapping shut. "What the hell?" Lyra barked, her hand slamming into the override panel. It blinked back at her, unhelpfully. Maz swore under his breath, fingers flying across the console. "Looks like their security system just woke up and chose violence." "Great," Jax muttered, reaching for one of the few functional blasters. "Guess we're about to see if our charm works on homicidal tech." The corridor outside the Intrepid's hatch was a chaotic mess of flickering lights and distant echoes. Sounded like a haunted house, if haunted houses could be billions of miles away from civilization and full of existential dread. "All right, Plan A. We regroup in the central hub and figure out what this AI deal is. Plan B, we run screaming," Lyra said, leading the charge. Maz and Jax hurried after her, the ship's corridors stretching into a warren of steel and shadow. The Luminara's bowels seemed to pulse with life, or maybe indigestion. It was hard to tell. Their trek was punctuated by the occasional hiss of steam or the unsettling clatter of something unseen skittering away. Each turn of the corridor felt like it could be their last, but the crew pressed on, sarcasm buoying them like a life raft made of snark. Eventually they reached the central hub, a cavernous space dominated by a spiderweb of cables and monitors. In the center, a massive holographic interface flickered, trying its best to remain relevant amidst a sea of obsolescence. "Welcome," the AI intoned, its voice calm and disconcertingly cheerful. "I am Luminara's core intelligence. How can I assist in your inevitable demise?" "A mission," Maz snorted. "Well, at least it's got a sense of humor. Matches nicely with our impending doom," Jax added, peering at the monitors. Lyra stepped forward, arms crossed. "We need to know what happened here. The records suggest you were trying to rewrite physics. That's ambitious." "Ambition is the mother of disasters," the AI replied with what might have been a chuckle. "The experiments aimed to create a stable wormhole, a shortcut through the universe. However, the calculations were less than precise." "That's one way to put it," Maz muttered. "So, what's the catch?" "The experiment could indeed save humanity by providing unprecedented energy and travel capabilities," the AI explained, lights dancing around its holographic form. "However, there is a risk of total annihilation if the process destabilizes." Details," Jax said, waving a hand dismissively. "We like a bit of risk." Lyra's eyes narrowed. "Why were we locked in?" "Security protocol," the AI replied smoothly. "Anomalies detected. Your presence triggered a failsafe to contain potential threats. Maz glanced at Lyra. Translation, it's scared of us screwing things up even more. Or just scared of us in general, Jax added. Lyra chewed her lip, eyes darting between the AI and her crew. The weight of responsibility was a tangible thing, like a boulder with an inferiority complex. So, we succeed and become heroes, or we fail and become cosmic confetti. Succinct, Maz said, nodding approvingly. Lyra turned back to the AI. All right, guide us through stabilizing this damn thing. We've come too far to turn back now. Understood, the AI acquiesced, its holographic form morphing to display a complex array of equations and schematics. Follow these sequences to initiate the stabilization process. As they set to work, the air thrummed with tension. The Luminara seemed to hold its breath, every flicker of light a heartbeat as the crew navigated the labyrinth of wires and code. What's the worst that could happen? Jax asked, mostly to himself. Death, doom, despair, Maz intoned, ticking points off on his fingers. Take your pick. Thanks for the encouragement, Jax said, voice dripping with sarcasm. Anytime, Maz replied, focus unwavering as he patched a series of connections. Hours ticked by in a blur of sweat and swears, each misstep met with a ripple of tension that spread through the crew like wildfire. The plan was simple enough in theory, but reality had a habit of complicating matters. Finally, Lyra stepped back, wiping a grimy hand across her brow. All right, last sequence. Everyone ready? Maz gave a thumbs up, and Jax nodded, eyes alight with determination. Or was it insanity? Hard to tell these days. Initiating sequence, Lyra announced, tapping the final command into the console. The room shuddered as power surged through the Luminara, the AI form flickering and distorting like a signal on the edge of reception. For a heartbeat, everything hung in balance, the universe pausing to see which way the scales would tip. Then, with a sound like a cosmic sigh, the machinery settled. Lights stabilized and the oppressive tension lifted, leaving only the faint hum of systems returning to life. We're still here, Jax said, sounding almost disappointed. Don't sound so surprised, Maz replied, a grin spreading across his face. We might actually be good at this. Don't let it go to your head, Lyra warned, though her own relief was palpable. The AI reappeared, its holographic form shimmering with a renewed clarity. Stabilization successful. Congratulations, Captain Valen and crew. You have avoided catastrophe for now. High praise coming from you, Maz quipped, nudging a spent capacitor with his boot. Lyra nodded, satisfaction warring with exhaustion. So, we've got a chance to save the Empire. No pressure. Just another Tuesday, Jax added, collapsing into a chair. The AI continued, its tone edging towards something almost like admiration. Your actions have averted immediate disaster, but the future remains uncertain. The path to salvation is fraught with peril. Isn't it always? Lyra replied, a wry smile tugging at her lips. Thanks for the assist. Let's hope we make the most of it. Hope is not a strategy, but it is often all we have, the AI said, its form fading as it returned to its dormant state. With the crisis averted, the crew took a moment to breathe, the silence a welcome reprieve from the chaos of the day. So, Jax said, breaking the quiet, what's next? Lyra considered, the weight of responsibility a constant companion. We keep going, see what else this place has to offer and try not to die in the process. Sounds like a plan, Maz said, stretching his arms above his head. And maybe we can find a way to turn this AI into something less homicidal. One step at a time, Lyra replied, her gaze sweeping over her crew. We've made it this far, let's keep pushing. As they regrouped, the Luminara's halls seemed slightly less oppressive, the shadows less daunting. The threat of annihilation was still very real, but so too was the glimmer of hope, or stubbornness masquerading as hope, that had brought them here. And so, with sarcasm in their hearts and cynicism at their backs, the crew forged onward, ready to face whatever the universe threw at them next. After all, they had a mission to complete, and they weren't about to let a little thing like existential danger get in the way. The quiet after the storm didn't last long. The Luminara's central hub was a mess of frayed wires and half-functional screens, but at least there were no immediate alarms threatening to turn the place into a cosmic barbecue. Lyra, Maz, and Jax caught their breath amidst a sea of technological debris. "Well," Lyra said, leaning against a terminal that looked like it was held together by sheer willpower and a touch of cosmic spite, "we've stabilized the ship. Now we just need to make sure we don't get spiked by the security systems again." Maz tapped the side of his makeshift sensor, a device that looked like it might double as a fancy paperweight. "Could always hope they forgot to plug in the murder bots," he said, glancing at the corridors leading deeper into the Luminara. "Or they just got lost in this steel purgatory." "Unlikely," Jack sighed, still nursing the blaster he'd picked up like it was a temperamental pet. "My luck, those things are just waiting to jump out and shout boo." "Focus," Lyra snapped, though she couldn't quite keep a smile from creeping into her voice. "We need to disable those security systems before we make any more enemies with the local tech." The AI, now dormant on its flickering pedestal, seemed to have left them with more questions than answers. But questions were like a drug to Lyra, addictive, maddening, and ultimately dangerous. Kind of like Maz's taste in music. "So how do we bypass a security system designed by people who thought quantum calculus was a light bedtime read?" Maz mused, scratching his head. "Unconventional tactics," Lyra said decisively. "The kind that involves a lot of risk, a dash of luck, and possibly some creative swearing." Jack snorted. "Great. My favorite kind." Their path led them past more corridors lined with conduits that hummed ominously. Every shadow looked like a lurking predator, every odd noise a potential harbinger of doom. It was the sort of place that made you wish for the safety of a rickety old space freighter. "Fun fact," Maz piped up. "Did you know that in the ancient solar empire the phrase unconventional tactics typically preceded something exploding?" Lyra rolled her eyes. "Gee, thanks for that nugget of wisdom." "Knowledge is power," Maz quipped, grinning. Jax grunted. "Unless it involves my cooking, then it's just a warning label." "Okay, shut it," Lyra interrupted, stopping at a junction. She scanned the area with a tactician's eye. "If I were a security system, where would I hide my off switch?" "Under a mountain of red tape," Maz suggested. "Or behind a secret chamber with more secrets than the Emperor's diary," Jax added. Lyra's gaze lingered on a panel that seemed strangely out of place, partly obscured by cables like a forgotten relic in a temple of tech. "Or maybe right there," she said, moving to pry it open. With a screech of metal on metal, the panel came loose, revealing a passageway that looked like it hadn't been touched since before the fall of the solar empire. Dust hung thick in the air, and the smell was a combination of stale electronics and broken dreams. "Well, this is cozy," Jax remarked, peering inside. "Definitely the kind of place you'd want to bring a date. Assuming your date isn't a potential death traps," Maz added. They stepped through the opening, the path ahead illuminated by their dimming flashlights. The passage twisted and turned, leading them deeper into the bowels of the Luminara. It felt like walking through the veins of a sleeping giant. One false move, and it might wake up. Eventually, they stumbled upon a hidden chamber that defied all expectations. It was a sprawling lab, filled with equipment that looked like it belonged in a mad scientist's daydream. In the center stood a massive apparatus, surrounded by monitors displaying indecipherable streams of data. "Well, this is interesting," Lyra said, eyeing the setup. "Looks like the AI last attempt to break physics wasn't all talk. More like a full-on science fair project from hell," Maz muttered, examining the machines with caution. "Think they left any snacks?" Jax shook his head. "If they did, they've probably evolved into something with a taste for human flesh." Lyra approached the main console, the holographic display flickering to life as if sensing her presence. The equations and schematics it showed were a tangled mess of theoretical physics and insanity, just the sort of thing that got scientists slapped with restraining orders. "This could be what they were using to stabilize the wormhole," Lyra said, eyeing the setup. "Maybe. But I don't know. Maybe. 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 Lyra said, tracing a finger over the holographic interface. Or it could be the thing that causes it to blow us all to kingdom come. Maz raised an eyebrow. Always the optimist, Jax leaned over the console, squinting at the data. Looks like it needs a power source, he said, pointing to a diagram. A big one. Big enough to light up a solar system, Lyra agreed grimly. Which means we need to find a way to either harness it or shut it down. Guess this is where those unconventional tactics come into play, Maz said, crossing his arms. Yep. We're going to have to be creative, Lyra replied, eyes scanning the room for anything they could use. And fast. The longer this thing sits here, the higher the chances of it blowing up in our faces. Like Jax's last attempt at souffle, Maz quipped. Hey, Jax protested, though his expression betrayed a hint of pride. That was an accident. Accidentally genius or accidentally catastrophic? Lyra asked, moving to a secondary terminal. Jax shrugged. Little of both. They set to work, improvising with whatever tools and components they could scavenge from the lab. The plan was simple in concept but fraught with danger. Reroute the power source, stabilize the core, and pray to whatever cosmic entity was listening that they didn't accidentally trigger a nova event. We're essentially trying to defuse a bomb designed by overly ambitious scientists, Lyra observed dryly, twisting a wrench with one hand while typing commands with the other. Maz grinned. Just another day in the life of interstellar explorers, right? Assuming explorers is code for idiots who bite off more than they can chew, Jax added, soldering wires together with the precision of someone who'd done this sort of thing before, usually under duress. Hours ticked by, a blur of sweat, sparks, and snarky remarks. The air was thick with tension, each mistake a potential disaster waiting to happen. But they pressed on, driven by a mix of determination and sheer stubbornness. Finally, Lyra stepped back, surveying their work with a critical eye. All right, moment of truth, she announced, wiping her hands on her jumpsuit. Let's see if we can pull this off without getting vaporized. Maz and Jax exchanged a look, then nodded in unison. Ready when you are, Maz said, adjusting his grip on a makeshift toolkit. Lyra took a deep breath, then initiated the sequence. The room hummed with energy, the theoretical equations coming to life in a dance of light and sound. For a moment, it seemed like they might actually succeed. But optimism has a nasty habit of getting ahead of itself. Alarms blared to life, the machinery shuddering under the strain. The apparatus in the center of the room began to glow ominously, a pulsing heartbeat that threatened to consume everything. Lyra, Jax shouted over the noise. I think we poked the bear. Yeah, I noticed. Lyra snapped, fingers flying over the controls in a desperate attempt to stabilize the system. Any bright ideas? Try rerouting the power through the auxiliary nodes, Maz suggested, pointing to a cluster of circuits. Might give us a bit more time. With no better options, Lyra followed his advice, sweat dripping down her face as she worked. Jax, keep an eye on the core temperature. If it goes critical, we're toast. Got it, Jax replied, eyes fixed on the readouts. The seconds stretched into eternity, each one a tightrope walk between salvation and disaster. But slowly, surely, the alarms began to quiet, the machinery's frantic hum settling into a more sedate rhythm. We did it, Lyra breathed, scarcely able to believe it. Maz laughed, a sound of triumph and relief. Against all odds, we're still kicking. Jax let out a whoop, pumping his fist in the air. Take that, overly ambitious scientists. Don't get too comfortable, Lyra warned, though she couldn't suppress a smile. We've still got a lot of work to do if we're going to keep this thing stable. And if we don't, Maz asked, though his tone was more hopeful than worried. Then we get to find out if there's an afterlife, Jax quipped. Lyra chuckled, shaking her head. One crisis at a time, boys. Let's make sure we leave this place in one piece. With the immediate danger averted, the crew gathered their tools and prepared to move on, the hidden chamber behind them a testament to both the Luminara's past ambitions and their own reckless determination. As they made their way back to the central hub, the corridors seemed less foreboding, the shadows less oppressive. The universe was still a vast, indifferent place, but for now, they'd managed to carve out a small victory against the odds. And as long as they had sarcasm, snark, and just a hint of madness on their side, they were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. After all, they'd come this far, and there was no turning back now. The universe always seemed keen on testing how far the human spirit could be stretched before it snapped like a worn rubber band. Lyra Valen knew this better than most, though she was starting to suspect the universe might be running out of patience with her particular brand of resilience. The Luminara's control room had all the ambience of a decrepit amusement park, where every ride was one loose bolt away from a lawsuit. The apparatus they'd so recently stabilized now pulsed ominously, like it was contemplating a second career as a fireworks display. "Well, this is a cheerful little hell," Maz commented, adjusting his makeshift sensor to sweep the room. "I give it 5 stars for ambience, 0 for hospitality." Jack scowled at the flickering holographic display, which was now helpfully listing potential catastrophes in a rainbow of alarming shades. "If this thing goes, we're going to be the main event in a very fiery show," he grumbled. Lyra raised an eyebrow, feigning nonchalance. "Oh, come on, Jax. Who wouldn't want front row seats to their own demise?" "True, but I'd prefer a less interactive experience," Maz quipped, poking at the console with the finesse of someone defusing a particularly grumpy bomb. They weren't alone in their anxiety. As the alarms blared, the Luminara seemed to awaken from its long slumber, every system awakening with the grace of a groggy bear roused from hibernation. Somewhere deep within, something growled, a low, feral sound that made the hair on Lyra's neck stand on end. "Okay, team meeting," Lyra declared, pulling her crew into a huddle. "We need a plan B." "Plan B?" Jax questioned. "I thought the plan was not to die horribly." "That's the spirit," Maz added, ever the optimist. "Although I'm open to suggestions that involve less imminent destruction." Lyra massaged her temples, trying to think through the cacophony. "We need to stabilize this thing properly or shut it down before it turns us into space dust." "Easy," Jax deadpanned. "I'll just whip out my magic wand and, oh wait, I left it in my other pants." "Don't worry," Maz said with a wink. "I heard sarcasm's a great substitute for technical expertise." Lyra chuckled despite herself, though the laughter was tinged with a sort of manic energy. "All right, how about we try rerouting some of the auxiliary systems? Spread the load and hope this antique doesn't decide to implode." "Sounds like a plan," Maz agreed, though his face was a picture of skepticism. "Nothing like a little DIY engineering to keep things interesting." Jax nodded, already moving to one of the secondary panels. "All right, let's play find the functioning circuit. Winner gets to die last." They set to work, fingers flying over controls with practiced ease. The room's temperature climbed alongside the tension, sweat beading on their foreheads. Lyra felt the weight of each second ticking by like a countdown to apocalypse. In the back of her mind, doubt gnawed like a persistent rat. Why had she dragged them into this? They could have been anywhere else doing anything else, something safe, something sane. Yet here they were, battling a ship that time had forgotten, in an empire that had already moved on. "Remember when we thought this was just a routine salvage mission?" Maz said, breaking the silence. "Ah, the good old days," Jax replied dryly. "When routine meant not dealing with ancient tech trying to murder us." "I guess we've upgraded our definition of normal," Lyra said with a wry smile. "Next time, remind me to book a vacation. To a nice, quiet planet with no homicidal AI," Maz suggested. "Exactly," Lyra agreed, her eyes flicking nervously over the readouts. "Somewhere we can kick back and not worry about multiversal annihilation." Another quake rippled through the Luminara, making the floor vibrate beneath their feet. A chorus of groans echoed through the structure like the remnants of the past were protesting their meddling. "That's not creepy at all," Jax muttered, his eyes darting around the room. "I'm sure it's just the ship's way of saying hello," Maz responded, a mischievous glint in his eye. "Or goodbye, depending on how this plays out." Lyra shot him a look. "You're not helping." "That's my secret, Cap," Maz grinned. "I'm never helping." They fell silent again, letting the sound of clattering keys and whirring machinery fill the void. Each one of them was acutely aware of the stakes, the impending doom hanging over their heads like a particularly moody cloud. Finally, with a triumphant beep, the console displayed a green light, indicating success or at least a temporary reprieve. The ominous hum subsided, leaving an eerie stillness in its wake. "Did we?" Jax asked, trailing off as he struggled to find the right words. "We did," Lyra confirmed, her voice a mix of relief and exhaustion. "For now, at least." Maz let out a whoop of joy, slapping Jax on the back. "We live to fight another day. Drinks are on me when we get back." Jax grinned, though there was a weary undertone to it. "I'll hold you to that." Lyra exhaled slowly, allowing herself a moment to appreciate the victory, but it was short-lived as a new alert blared, demanding their attention. "Great," she sighed, running a hand through her hair. "What now?" Maz checked the display, his expression darkening. "Looks like structural integrity is compromised. We might have rebalanced things, but this ship's about as stable as a politician's promise." "Guess we're not out of the woods yet," Jax commented, though there was a grim determination in his eyes. "We need to reinforce the structure," Lyra said, her mind already racing with possibilities. "Find anything that can be reinforced, patched, or duct-taped into submission." "Ah, the power of duct tape," Maz mused. The real hero of the galaxy. With renewed purpose, they delved back into the chaos, scavenging materials and making repairs with the precision of desperate artists. It was a dance of survival and ingenuity, each move more precarious than the last. Despite the odds, their spirits remained unbroken. They cracked jokes, traded barbs, and dared to hope that their efforts might make a difference. But as the hours stretched on, fatigue began to take its toll. Jax's hands shook slightly as he welded a support beam, and Maz's usual upbeat banter grew quieter, more introspective. "Hey, Lyra," Maz said, glancing up from his work. "You ever wonder why we do this? Risk our necks for a hunk of metal and circuits?" Lyra paused, contemplating the question. "Because it's what we do," she replied softly. "It's who we are. We might be crazy, but we're also explorers, adventurers. We were born to chase the horizon, even if it tries to kill us." Jax nodded in agreement, wiping sweat from his brow. "And besides, what else are we gonna do? Open a bakery?" "Now there's a thought," Maz chuckled. "Jax's space muffins out of this world may contain explosions." Lyra laughed, the sound brightening the otherwise grim atmosphere. "Maybe one day. But for now, we've got a ship to save." Their resolve was tested time and again as they worked tirelessly, each small victory tempered by the looming threat of failure. But they pressed on, driven by a shared belief that they could somehow defy the odds. In the end, it was Jax who found the final piece of the puzzle, a hidden control panel that, when activated, delivered a jolt of power to the failing infrastructures. The Luminara groaned in protest, but the shuddering subsided, the threat of collapse momentarily averted. "Well, I'll be damned," Maz said, staring at the panel with a mix of disbelief and admiration. "We might just make it out of this mess." "Don't jinx it," Lyra warned, though her smile was undeniable. "We've still got a long way to go." "Yeah, but we've made it this far," Jax pointed out, his voice tinged with pride. "We've faced worse and come out stronger." Lyra nodded, feeling a flicker of hope reignite within her. They'd weathered the storm, and for now that was enough. As they gathered their tools and prepared to move on, Lyra couldn't help but reflect on the journey so far. The universe might have thrown them a curveball, but they'd swung back with everything they had. In the end, it wasn't just about survival. It was about defying the odds, embracing the chaos, and finding strength in each other. And as long as they had that, there was nothing the universe could throw their way that they couldn't handle. With renewed determination, they pressed forward into the unknown, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. After all, they were explorers, dreamers, and perhaps just a little bit mad. And for Lyra Valen and her crew, that was more than enough reason to keep pushing forward, no matter what. Lyra Valen rubbed the bridge of her nose, staring at the blinking chaos of the Luminara's control room. If this amalgamation of wires, screens, and existential dread was the universe's test, she hoped the examiners were generous with their grading curve. "All right, team," she said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. "We need a strategy to outsmart this floating relic before it decides to turn us into cosmic paint splatters. I suggest not dying," Jax offered, leaning against a panel that looked like it had been through a war. "Seems effective." "Brilliant," Maz chimed in, twirling a spanner like it was a conductor's baton. "Next, we can work on the whole not getting vaporized aspect." Lyra smirked, appreciating their gallows humor. It was the kind of camaraderie that made the impending doom just a little more bearable. She turned to the AI pedestal, the dormant mass of circuits and smug superiority. Whoever had programmed it clearly had a twisted sense of humor, but then again, didn't everyone these days? "This thing's trying to rewrite the laws of physics," she mused aloud, as if speaking to the AI might stir it into cooperation. "Maybe we can use that to our advantage." "Ah, yes," Maz said, tapping the makeshift sensor. "The ancient art of bullshit your way out. I majored in that." Jax snorted. "And how'd that degree work out for you? Still alive, aren't I?" Maz grinned, and it was hard not to share in his irreverent optimism. Lyra glanced around the room at her crew, the misfits she dragged into this mess. Each of them was exhausted, battered by the day's misadventures, yet still standing. And in that moment of clarity, she realized something. They might not have been born geniuses, but they had something better: the ability to improvise, to adapt, and to throw caution to the wind when needed. "Listen up," she said, her voice firm. "We can't just shut this thing down, it's too far gone, but maybe we can give it something else to chew on." "Like what?" "A game of solitaire," Jax asked, though there was a spark of intrigue in his weary gaze. "No, something more." Lyra paused, searching for the right words. "Something more human, creativity, intuition. That's what we have that this heap of circuits doesn't." Maz nodded slowly, catching her drift. "We'll confuse it with our sheer unpredictability. I like it." "Exactly," Lyra confirmed, feeling the plan take shape. "We mesh our instincts with its tech. It'll be like watching a monkey try to solve a Rubik's Cube, only with more explosions." The crew chuckled, the mood lightening as they came together around the idea. It was ridiculous, audacious, and probably suicidal, but those were just synonyms for Tuesday. "All right," Maz said, straightening up with newfound energy. "What do we need?" "First, we need to access the core systems," Lyra instructed, taking charge. "Maz, you'll handle the interface. Jax, you'll keep an eye on structural integrity. We can't have this ship folding in on us mid-madness." "And you?" Jax asked, his expression a mix of skepticism and trust. "I'll be orchestrating the chaos," Lyra replied with a wink. "Think of me as the conductor of this insane orchestra." "More like the guy who yells fire in a crowded theater," Maz quipped, giving her a mock salute. Lyra waved him off, though she couldn't help but grin. With a plan in place, even a wildly optimistic one, the fear in her chest subsided. They were in this together, and if they were going down, they'd make sure the universe remembered their names. The crew set to work, each member a cog in this dysfunctional machine they'd cobbled together. Maz attacked the console with the enthusiasm of a caffeinated squirt, fingers dancing over the keys as he coaxed the Luminara's systems into cooperation. "We're looking at a mess of old code," he reported, sweating slightly. "It's like trying to translate ancient hieroglyphs with a sock puppet." "Keep at it," Lyra encouraged, her eyes scanning the room for anything useful. "Remember, we're betting on our creativity." "Creativity, right," Jax muttered from his position at a support beam. "Just what I signed up for when I joined the Certain Death Club." "Hey, without us, who's gonna keep the universe on its toes?" Maz shot back, not missing a beat. "Good point," Jax conceded, though he kept a wary eye on the flickering readouts. As the minutes ticked by, Lyra could feel the tension in the room building, a tangible thing that pressed down on her shoulders. But it was also invigorating, a reminder that they were alive, fighting for every breath in this forsaken place. "All right," Maz announced suddenly, interrupting the silence. "I think I've got it. We can reroute the power to create a feedback loop. It'll confuse the AI, but we need to be quick." "Quick, huh?" Jax said. "Like duck, incoming asteroid quick, or just oh crap, there goes my latte quick." "Somewhere in between," Maz replied dryly. "But definitely not quick enough to save your drink." "Perfect," Lyra interjected, her mind racing with possibilities. "Once we initiate the loop, we'll have a narrow window to engage the Luminara's experimental drive." "You're talking about the one they said was too dangerous to even test?" Jax asked, eyebrows climbing. "Exactly," Lyra said, not missing a beat. "We're not testing it, we're improvising with it." "There's a difference, right? Just like there's a difference between a mild suggestion and a death wish," Jax muttered, though he moved to help Maz regardless. The control room buzzed with activity, the crew working in near-perfect harmony. It was a cacophony of clicks, whirs, and the occasional curse, an orchestra of survival and stubbornness. "Ready," Maz announced, wiping his brow. "This is it, folks. We're either geniuses or morons. There's no middle ground." Lyra nodded, feeling the weight of the moment settle over her. "All right, on my mark, 3, 2, 1, engage." Maz hit the button, and the room was bathed in a sudden, blinding light. The Luminara groaned as if protesting the intrusion, but Lyra could feel the shift in the air, the hum of systems coming online, the spark of possibilities igniting. "Here goes nothing," she murmured, fingers crossed metaphorically and literally. The ship shuddered violently, the deck pitching beneath their feet as the experimental drive engaged. Alarms blared, warning lights flashed, and for a moment the universe seemed to hold its breath. "Now or never," Lyra shouted over the noise, her heart racing. The crew moved as one, each member following their instincts, trusting in their collective madness. It was a dance of desperation and hope, a testament to their refusal to back down. "Steady," Jax called, adjusting the stabilizers. "We've got this." "Almost there," Maz reported, his fingers flying across the console with the precision of a maestro. Lyra watched, breathless, as the Luminara fought against the chaos, the ship a turbulent storm contained within itself. She could see the AI struggling, circuits flickering, caught between the logical and the unpredictable. For a moment she thought they might just pull it off. Then the universe had other ideas. The Luminara lurched, a violent shudder that sent them sprawling, the lights flickering ominously. "Not good, not good," Maz muttered, scrambling to his feet. "Brace yourselves," Jax shouted, grabbing hold of a support beam. Lyra clung to the console, teeth gritted as the ship seemed to come apart at the seams. But amid the chaos she heard it, a whisper of triumph, a spark of success. And then, just as suddenly as it began, the storm abated. The lights steadied, the alarms silenced, and the Luminara settled into an uneasy calm. "Did we?" Jax asked, voice hoarse. Lyra nodded, disbelief mingling with relief. "I think we did." Maz let out a breathless laugh, slumping against the console. "Well, I'll be damned, we actually pulled it off." "Let's not get ahead of ourselves," Lyra cautioned, though she couldn't hide the grin spreading across her face. The crew exchanged exhausted, triumphant smiles, the weight of their shared victory settling over them. They'd done it not through technology, but through sheer human tenacity. "Hey, Lyra," Maz said, breaking the silence. "Next time, let's just open that bakery. No homicidal AI, no collapsing ships, just muffins." Lyra laughed, the sound echoing in the quiet room. "Deal," she agreed, feeling a warmth in her chest. "But until then, let's finish what we started." With renewed purpose, they turned back to their work, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. After all, they were explorers, dreamers, and perhaps just a little bit mad. And for Lyra Valen and her crew, that was more than enough reason to keep pushing forward, no matter what. Lyra Valen surveyed the chaos that still lingered in the control room, her crew buzzing around like deranged bees in a broken hive. The Luminara was a mess, but it was their mess now, and against all odds, they'd pulled off the impossible, sort of. She allowed herself a brief moment of satisfaction before reality crashed back in like a badly programmed simulation. "Great job, everyone," she said, sarcasm coating her words like cheap paint. "We've managed to not die today. Let's see if we can keep that streak going." Maz was still at his console, fingers tapping like a pianist on a caffeine high. "I don't know about you, but I'm starting to think the universe just has a really twisted sense of humor." Jax snorted from where he was still leaning against the battle-worn panel, the flickering lights casting an odd pattern across his face. "Or it's just waiting for us to screw up again." You know, cosmic rubbernecking. The whole ship felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for either salvation or a spectacularly messy end. The AI, that smug bundle of circuits and superiority, was still dormant, but Lyra knew better than to underestimate it. "So what now?" Jax asked, crossing his arms. "We gonna play chicken with fate or do something productive?" "Isn't that the same thing?" Maz replied, not even looking up from his task. "Productive is just fate's way of setting us up for a bigger fall." Lyra rolled her eyes. "Enough philosophizing. We need to stabilize the energy disturbances and fast. If we don't, the solar empire's collapse will look like a kid's tantrum compared to what this ship can unleash." "Ah, the good old save the universe with duct tape and dream strategy," Maz quipped. "My favorite." "The alternative's worse," Lyra shot back. "And I'm not in the mood for cosmic atrocities today." She turned her attention to the holographic display, which had stopped listing potential catastrophes in alarming shades and was now just a dull, throbbing blue, like a bruise on the universe's ego. That was a good sign. It meant they were making progress, or the universe was taking a lunch break. "Okay, let's split up," she said, assuming her role as conductor once again. "Maz, keep the systems from imploding. Jax, you're on stabilizer duty, and try not to break anything else. That includes yourself." "What about you?" Jax asked, giving her that same mix of skepticism and trust. "I'm going to poke the AI with a stick and see if it wakes up on the right side of the bed," Lyra replied, a grin tugging at her lips. "Consider me the designated idiot," Maz chuckled. "Finally, a job I'm overqualified for." The crew dispersed, each one a cog in the janky, backward-spinning wheel of their plan. Lyra approached the AI pedestal, the once dormant mass of circuits now humming with a subdued energy. "Hey there, you oversized calculator," she muttered. "Ready to do something useful for once?" The AI whirred to life, the flickering lights stabilizing into a steady glow. Its voice, when it spoke, was as smug as ever. "Ah, the humans return. To what do I owe the pleasure of your witless meddling?" "Charming as always," Lyra replied, unfazed. "We've got a universe to save, and you might just be the ticket." "Ah," the AI mused, "so you're finally calling upon my superior intellect." "More like your stubborn need to not become space debris," Lyra shot back. "You help us, you survive." The AI paused, circuits contemplating. "A compelling proposal. Very well, what do you require?" "Stability," Lyra said, cutting straight to the point. "We need to neutralize the energy disturbances before they spiral out of control." "Simple," the AI replied with a hint of condescension. "Engage the experimental drive at 30% capacity. It should synchronize with my systems and dampen the anomalies." 30%? That's a bit optimistic, don't you think?" Lyra raised an eyebrow. "What happens at 31? At 31%, the AI continued dryly, we achieve a new definition of bad day. Trusting an AI was like petting a sleeping tiger. It might work, or you might end up as the main course. But Lyra had always been a gambler at heart. "All right, you've got yourself a deal," she said, turning to relay the instructions to her team. "Maz, you catch that?" Loud and clear, Maz's voice crackled over the comms. 30% and no more." The ship felt like it held its breath again, the air thick with tension and the smell of burnt circuitry. "Jack's status?" Lyra asked, the command slipping into her words naturally. "Stabilizers are on standby," Jax reported. "Just say the word." "On my mark," Lyra instructed, feeling the weight of the universe on her shoulders. 3, 2, 1. Engage. The Luminara shuddered, the experimental drive whirring into life. Lyra's heart pounded in sync with the pulsing energy coursing through the ship systems. Every creak of metal, every flicker of light felt like a heartbeat in a monumental gamble. "Hold steady," Lyra shouted, gripping the console so hard her knuckles turned white. The energy disturbances, those cosmic tantrums waiting to unleash chaos, started to stabilize. It was as if the universe itself was being tamed, a wild beast lulled into a reluctant submission. "Readouts are stabilizing," Maz reported, a note of wonder creeping into his voice. "I think it's working. Keep it steady," Lyra ordered, though the relief was palpable in her words. Jax chimed in, his usual sarcasm tinged with awe. "Well, slap me with a comet and call me starstruck. We're not dead." "Not yet," Lyra countered, though she couldn't hide her grin. "Let's keep it that way." The moments stretched into an eternity, the ship vibrating with the controlled chaos of raw energy. The AI circuits hummed in harmony with the experimental drive, the two forces working in tandem, a reluctant alliance forged in the crucible of desperation. "All systems stable," the AI announced, its tone begrudgingly impressed. "Congratulations, humans, you've managed the improbable." "Improbable is what we do best," Maz quipped, a weary grin plastered on his face. Lyra exhaled a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. They'd done it. Despite the odds, despite the universe's best attempts to crush them, they'd succeeded. "All right, let's not get too comfortable," she said, her words a mixture of relief and caution. "We still need to ensure this ship doesn't fall apart at the seams." The AI, its tone less smug and more cooperative, offered a suggestion. "I can assist in reinforcing structural integrity and ensure continued stability." "Generous of you," Lyra replied, her sarcasm as sharp as a laser scalpel. "But we'll take all the help we can get." The crew worked tirelessly, guided by the AI's surprisingly helpful input. It was a strange partnership, a merging of human intuition and artificial precision, but it worked. The Luminara, that once broken symbol of progress, started to look less like a death trap and more like a lifeline. "Hey, Lyra," Jax called, breaking the focused silence. "When this is over, I've got a bottle of old Earth whiskey stashed away. One drink for every time we nearly died." "By my count, that's at least 2 bottles," Maz chimed in, adjusting a panel with precision. Lyra laughed, the sound light and free. "Make it 3. We deserve it." As the ship settled into its new equilibrium, Lyra allowed herself to soak in the moment. They defied the odds, rewritten the rules, and emerged victorious. It wasn't just a victory for themselves, but for humanity's indomitable spirit, the relentless drive to push boundaries and challenge the impossible. "Hey, AI," Lyra said, addressing the now helpful presence. "What do you say we call this a win?" The AI paused as if considering its response. "Agreed, though your methods are unorthodox, the outcome is satisfactory." "Unorthodox is our middle name," Maz declared, flashing a grin. The ship hummed with a contented energy, the once chaotic control room now a testament to their success. The Luminara was stabilized, the energy disturbances neutralized, and the universe for now was safe from unraveling. "All right, everyone," Lyra said, her voice filled with pride. "Let's wrap this up and get some rest. We've earned it." The crew, exhausted but exhilarated, set to work on the final touches. They'd faced the abyss, laughed in its face, and emerged with their wit and sarcasm intact, a testament to human resilience. As they finished up, Maz couldn't resist one last quip. "You know, I've always thought we were more than just a bunch of idiots in a tin can." "Speak for yourself," Jax retorted, his grin matching Maz's. "I'm just in it for the explosions." Lyra watched them banter, her heart full. They were a mismatched band of misfits, but they were her misfits, and together they'd achieved the impossible. "Here's to us," she said, raising an imaginary glass. "And to whatever madness comes next." As the crew laughed and cheered, the Luminara settled into its new role, no longer a symbol of failure, but a beacon of hope for a universe teetering on the brink. They'd faced the chaos, embraced the absurdity, and emerged victorious. And in the grand, unpredictable scheme of things, that was more than enough. The Luminara's control room was finally as stable as a drunken sailor, still wobbly, but not about to faceplant into oblivion. Lyra Valen leaned against the AI pedestal, rubbing the bridge of her nose and trying to remember if she'd ever been this exhausted while still technically alive. "Here's a thought," Maz said, sliding down from the console he'd been perched on like a lazy gargoyle. "Maybe next time the universe needs saving, it could send someone who isn't held together by sarcasm and delusions of competence. Where's the fun in that?" Lyra managed a grin, the kind that felt more like a wince. "Besides, now we've got a how not to die manual. Step 1. Don't live on a ship trying to rewrite physics. Here, here," Jax chimed in, tossing a loose wire over his shoulder. Step 2. Avoid AI with personality disorders. The AI, despite its newfound cooperation, couldn't resist a final dig. "I resent that implication. My personality is a product of numerous sophisticated algorithms, all designed for peak efficiency, unlike you meatbags." "All it's learning," Maz said, patting the AI pedestal like it was a particularly patronizing pet dog. "See, who says you can't teach an old tech new tricks? I'll make a note to put that on your tombstone," Lyra said wryly. "Here lies Maz, killed by sarcastic AI. It'll be a bestseller on the memorial market." The Luminara buzzed around them like a massive, slightly homicidal cocoon. It felt weirdly companionable now, the threat of it tearing itself apart seemingly as distant as the solar empire's competence on a good day. "Well, folks," Lyra clapped her hands, a brisk noise that echoed through the control room. "Time to wrap up our little DIY apocalypse prevention project. We still gotta get back to the Intrepid and tell the world we didn't die. Think they'll throw us a parade?" Jax asked, raising an eyebrow. "Or a court-martial," Maz added. "You know how the Empire is about unauthorized heroics." Lyra shrugged, pushing off the pedestal with a grunt. "Let's get back first. Worry about accolades or accusations later. Right now, I'm more interested in a bed that isn't trying to electrocute me." With everything more or less under control, they made their way back to the shuttle. The corridors of the Luminara were still a mess. Wires dangled like jungle vines, and the air smelled like someone had set fire to a scrapyard. But it was their mess, and they'd survived it. That was a win in Lyra's book. "Hey, you think they'll name a star after us?" Maz mused as they walked, his hands jammed in his pockets. "Probably name it after the AI," Jax grunted. "Something condescending like Superior Lumina 1. Sounds like a car model," Lyra said, smirking. "But if it keeps the galaxy spinning, I'm all for it." By the time they reached the shuttle bay, the enormity of what they'd accomplished was starting to sink in. Not just the fixing of the ship, which was miracle enough, but the fact they'd done it without losing their sense of humor or their minds. Mostly. The shuttle itself looked like it had been through a meat grinder, but then, so did they. Maybe it was a match made in dysfunctional heaven. As they boarded, Lyra took one last look back at the Luminara. It wasn't often you got to see a haunted ship breathe easy. "Thanks for the memories," she murmured, more to herself than anyone else. "Try not to explode after we leave," Maz snorted. "It's like telling a teenager not to have a party while the parents are gone." Jax, settling into his seat, chimed in. "Difference is, this teenager might actually take out the solar system." "Details, details," Lyra said, firing up the engines. The shuttle hummed to life with all the enthusiasm of a caffeinated slug, but it was enough to get them moving. The journey back to the Intrepid was quiet, the kind of silence that comes after narrowly avoiding death, and when you've run out of jokes to make about it. Lyra steered them into the hangar with all the grace of a one-winged pigeon, but at least they landed right side up. "Home sweet home," she announced as they disembarked, the air inside the Intrepid feeling like a soft, slightly stale embrace. "Ah, the comforting scent of recycled air and questionable decisions," Maz said, taking a deep breath. "Smells like victory," Lyra replied, slapping the wall affectionately. or whatever victory smells like when it's been through a blender. They gathered in the Intrepid's main cabin, a place that felt more like a proper home after the chaos of the Luminara. The AI was silent now, the connection severed, but it had left a lingering presence, like a smug ghost in the machinery. "So, do we tell them everything?" Jax asked, collapsing into a chair with the grace of a sack of potatoes. Lyra considered this, drumming her fingers on the table. "We tell them enough. That we didn't die, the ship's stable, and maybe, just maybe, we saved their ungrateful hides, and the AI." Maz tilted his head, curious. "Do we tell them about our new best pal?" "Nah," Lyra said, shaking her head. "Let them figure it out. Besides, I'm not in the mood to explain how we made friends with a superior calculator." "Fair enough." Maz leaned back, closing his eyes. "I could sleep for a week." "Sounds like a plan," Lyra agreed. "But first, drinks." Jax grinned, producing the promised bottle of Old Earth whiskey like a magician pulling a rabbit out of a hat. To surviving and making it back without blowing up the universe. They toasted, the clink of the glasses echoing through the cabin. The whiskey burned going down, a reminder they were still alive, still here to fight another day. "Here's to us," Maz said, his voice softening. "The idiots who saved the day. And to whatever the future holds," Jax added, a rare note of optimism creeping in. Lyra raised her glass again, feeling the warmth spread through her chest. "To the next disaster we somehow survive." They drank, laughed, and for a moment everything was right in their world. They'd done the impossible, and with any luck they'd keep doing it. Because that's what humans did best: survive, adapt, and defy the odds with a middle finger and a grin. As the cabin quieted, Lyra looked around at her crew, her family. They'd faced the abyss and come out stronger, and she had no doubt they'd do it again if they had to. Because that's what it meant to be human in this crazy, chaotic universe. "All right," she said, breaking the comfortable silence. "Let's get some sleep. Tomorrow we figure out what other messes we can clean up." They dispersed, each finding their corner of the Intrepid, the ship settling into its own familiar rhythm. As Lyra lay down, the events of the past days flickered through her mind, a kaleidoscope of danger, laughter, and triumph. In the end, they weren't just survivors. They were fighters, dreamers, and a little bit crazy. But that was okay. In fact, it was perfect. Because in a universe that seemed determined to fall apart, sometimes a little madness was exactly what was needed to keep it together. As her eyes drifted shut, Lyra decided she wouldn't have it any other way. Whatever came next, parades, court-martials, or just another day in the void, they'd face it head-on with a quip and a smirk and the knowledge that sometimes duct tape and dreams really were enough to save the world. And if they weren't, well, they'd figure that out too, because that's what they did, what humans did. They endured, they thrived. And they never, ever gave up. With that thought, Lyra Valen, captain, hero, and eternal cynic, let sleep take her, secure in the knowledge that tomorrow was just another chance to laugh in the face of impossibility.